Welcome to today's webinar, How to Know When It's Time to Go. This event is brought to you by your Vanderbilt Alumni Association. I'm Mary Pellet and I work in the alumni office. So glad that y'all could join us today from wherever you are in the world. This webinar is going to last about 45 minutes and there will be time at the end to ask questions. If you have any questions as we go along, feel free to type them in the chat box. And then also at the end, if any additional questions come up, you can type them in the chat box as well, and Hallie will answer them. In a moment, I'm going to send you all a link that you all can use. There's a form that you all can use to follow along during the webinar. And as I noted, this webinar is going to be recorded, and we will post it on buconnect.com, our alumni website, in the coming days. Many of you have know Hallie from her webinars with us. She is a wonderful career expert and a Vanderbilt alum. Hallie graduated in '95, and she is certified career coach, speaker, author, and national career expert since 2002. Her company, Create Your Career Path, is headquartered in Atlanta, Georgia, and she's regularly featured in the media. Forbes, CNN, Money Magazine, and the Wall Street Journal are all places that she has shared her expertise. She is an undergraduate she has undergraduate and graduate degrees. Vanderbilt University and the University of Illinois is where she got her master's. And she has over 2,000 success stories. I'm sure that number is growing, Hallie. Yes, and she has a team of coaches and resume writers that help professionals find jobs that make them want to jump out of bed in the morning and go to work. Her company website is createyourcareerpath.com. And now I'm excited to turn today's webinar over to Hallie.
Thanks, Mary. Greatly appreciate it. And next time we'll take out my date of graduation because I was like, oh, that's aging me. I'm a proud Vandy alum and especially thrilled to be here with you all today because of our, common alumni background. And we're going to be talking today about, how to know when it's time to make a move and change either jobs or change career paths or fields completely. And a lot of people have been thinking about this in the past many months. As we all know and have heard about the Great Resignation, we do see signs of that slowing down just a little bit. But I feel like from talking with our clients and the work that we do that like being more conscious of and demanding, so to speak, that your job is a better fit for you and that it's rewarding, I think that sense of things is here to stay, that people are not going to settle for less for a really long time. It's one of the kind of benefits of going through what we did in the past several years. There are not many of them, but that I think is kind of a possible silver lining. So we're going to talk today about how to really, really know when it's time to go, because a lot of people are thinking about it. They're curious, whether they should make a move or not, what's the best thing for them. And as Mary already said, I'm a certified career coach. Our company is actually based in Atlanta, Georgia. We have resume writers and career coaches all over. So for when COVID hit for us, we have always worked remotely. So at least in that way, it was easy for us. And the advice that I'm going to give you all today is advice and tools that we use with all of our clients every day to help them figure out what the right career fit is and the criteria, if you will, that you really need to be considering so that you make a smart, educated, wise decision versus just some kind of, knee-jerk reaction. So as we all know, COVID-19 had a huge impact on the workplace for all of us for different reasons. So our kind of running joke, I'm going to move this over here a little bit, has been that we are helping people find jobs that make them want to jump out of bed to work, to walk down the hall, to go to work. The COVID-19 impact, we've seen so many different things with our clients. Some of our clients were saying, I actually realized that the coworkers in my work environment was one of the most fulfilling things to me. And now that I'm working remotely, I don't like my job at all. Some people said like that, they miss the office. Whereas other clients on the complete and other end of the spectrum were saying, I never want to go back to the office. And how do I tell my boss I never want to see her again in person, so to speak? So it impacted all of us, I think, in really different ways. Everyone feels differently about working remotely, understandably, because we're all kind of wired differently. And we all, I think, experience that sense of being less motivated, connected, and engaged. So one of the things, though, that we actually want you to think about first as we're framing this out for today is consider how long you have felt unsatisfied or unsure if you should stay or go. Was it pre-COVID for a long enough time that you've been feeling this way for a while? Or is it more so due to everything that has changed and what has happened as a result of COVID? Because that can help give you a sense of like how dramatic of a change it is that you need to make. And also if it would be wise to stay put for a little while longer to let things kind of settle into place a little bit more as companies try to navigate and figure out how they're going to handle hybrid working or whatever it is. I think most of them have figured it out what they want to do for the most part now. But as we all know, they're looking for, good employees, and they're throwing benefits at people to get them hired, et cetera. So I think we're all still kind of figuring this out to a certain extent. So this would be the first step, is consider the length of time that you've felt this way. Here's our agenda for today. And just as a reminder, you will receive a recording of today. On the next slide, I'll show you an email address that you can send to us if you would like to receive the slides. We're going to talk about why being in the right fit is really important to our satisfaction in every area of our life. We'll give you a quick quiz of 8 red flags to know if you are in the wrong fit, and for sure if it's time to go and make a move. We'll discuss why it's so important from our perspective to really define what's fulfilling to you first before you think about anything else. And then we'll share with you as well our ideal career model that we use with all of our clients, kind of as a checklist to say all of these boxes need to be checked. If they're not, you need to consider making a move. But the model also helps them kind of evaluate how big of a transition they need to make, as well as brainstorm other possible ideas. So on this next slide, as I said just a second ago, you can email us if you'd like a copy of our slides at admin@halliecrawford.com, and they will be downloadable on our website. So let's dive into number 1, our first tip here. And just as a really quick reminder too, as we go through our tips, we will have time for Q&A a little bit at the end. So feel free to put those in the chat box as we go. Why is career fit important? It's because we don't want to be like the man on this slide, right? When we are not satisfied at work, it bleeds into every other aspect and element of our lives. And even pre-COVID, there were always surveys, if you will, and assessments that always came out kind of negatively, unfortunately, that 51% of the people out there were not engaged at work. And I would see these every few years, and just the satisfaction in terms of work life is never, or has never been high enough, in my opinion. And people are twice as likely to be anxious. And as we said earlier, it really does take a toll on your quality of life inside work, but also outside too, because we're whole human beings and everything impacts everything else. And there are lots of different reasons why we can get stuck in the wrong fit. And it's a good idea to actually think about these things a little bit, to consider, why am I in my current job right now? Am I in it for the right reasons or the wrong reasons? And even like make a list of what those reasons are, so you can evaluate a little bit more objectively, like, am I here for enough good reasons? And are the reasons good enough based on what's important to me now? Some people will tell us they got stuck in, or they've ended up stuck in a career path that doesn't work for them because they're really good at it. But maybe it was either never rewarding or it's become less rewarding for them over time. Sometimes people say, well, the job was offered and I need to pay my graduate school bills. That was me. And so I took a job that I knew actually wasn't going to be a fit, but I needed the job and I stayed there longer than I should have. Some people will say it's the salary and the golden handcuffs, or someone, a friend or family member suggested this career path, so I figured I'd try it. So please know you're not alone. There's nothing wrong with you if you feel like you didn't make the right choice. We are all like I think so many of us have been in that same boat, so we completely understand. And one of the things that we'll talk about a little bit later in our session today is that to help us get out of the wrong fit and identify some ideas about what could be better, there are some good career assessments out there that we find are really helpful, but they're only one piece to the puzzle. So we'd love for you to use an assessment or use the results if you already have. But we want you to be mindful that it's not a magic wand, and we'll tell you more about that later as we go. So one of the things as we're talking about why satisfaction is important is we really want you to have the right perspective about making a change. And the reason why we share this kind of these three levels, if you will, of satisfaction is we want you to consider how unsatisfied you are for how long of a period of time, but how unsatisfied you might be with multiple aspects of your job, not just saying, okay, I'm unsatisfied and, oh, I need to make a change, but really even start to make a list of what are the things that are not working for you? Is it mostly just the work environment? Is it also like your boss? Is it also, for example, the location, or is it just one or two things? And the reason why I say this is because it's a really important thing to consider how dramatic of a change is really needed for you to be more satisfied. So if you're like satisfied, 50% of the time or 60% of the time, for example, you may need to just change into a different organization within your same industry, a little bit less of a dramatic change. If you're somewhat satisfied, it's a really good idea to separate what works for you at your current job and what doesn't work, and think about, well, maybe I need a completely new role, but in the same industry or in the same organization. And if you're really, really unsatisfied, you probably need to make more dramatic of a change. So think of this change, please, not in terms of just black and white, like, okay, I need to make a change and that's it, and it needs to be pretty dramatic. But think of it on a spectrum of maybe I need to make more of a course correction in terms of change of role, organization, or industry versus, oh, I have to throw the baby out with the bathwater and start all over again. This is really important because what we find is that usually the change for our clients that is required in order for them to be in the right fit and feel more satisfied, it's usually less dramatic of a change than they think it needs to be at the beginning. I'll give you a really quick example. We had a woman once who was working at one of the big four consulting firms. When she first came to us, she literally was like, I don't know what I should be doing. I am kind of thinking I should go be a chef, like something completely different than what she had done before. But when we worked with her, used the model, went through our checklist and helped her think about, okay, what was going well and what wasn't going well, she realized that a lot of actually what was going on for her was not not the role that she was in, because that was actually a really good fit for her. And a lot of the work environment and the culture there was good. The majority of what was going on was some of the people that were around her. And she also decided to, instead of being an external consultant, that internal consulting and working within one organization would be a little bit of a better fit for her. So that's the good news, okay? The other thing we want you to consider when you're wondering about making a change or not is we also want you to be realistic. That I know that most of us are wanting and demanding, which is a good thing, in my book, greater satisfaction and for our employers to be better about work-life balance, flexibility and all of that. And I think all of that is absolutely fantastic, more so than ever in, the history of time. We have been able as employees to be, I think, more empowered to ask for what we want. But we also have to be careful about realizing too that it's not always just do what you love and the money will follow. I like that saying because I think it's important for people to feel really fulfilled and enjoy what they do. And I think they will be more successful as a result. But the money didn't just follow me. Like I do what I love, but I had to work really hard to make things happen. And the second thing that I want you to consider too is we're not going for perfection here, because I think that that is a mistake and people have to be careful about assuming that a job is going to be perfect every single second of the day. What you want to go for instead is listed at the bottom right-hand side of this slide, is you want to be saying to yourself, I'm looking for a job where the good parts about it so far outweigh the bad parts, the things that I don't like as much, that I barely notice those bad parts, so to speak. And that's how I feel about what I do. There are things absolutely that I would rather not have to do as a business owner and sometimes as a coach as well. But I barely notice those and I can tolerate and deal with them because the good parts about my job so far outweigh those. That's the perspective that we want you to take to be really realistic about things. Okay. So let's talk next about our second kind of tip here, if you will. So we talked about, why this is so important and also how to kind of be realistic and practical about, how big of a change you need to make. And also being realistic about, work is still going to be work to a certain extent. Let's talk next about the 8 red flags that we would have people consider to know if they are in the wrong fit at the end of the day. And we'll go through the red flags. And then at the end, we'll show you kind of, depending on where you rank, what that means for you. Okay. So the first 4 to really know if you're in the wrong fit is number 1, if you feel like you dread getting out of bed every single morning. It's not just the Monday morning blues like some of us will have, but it's pretty much every single day that you just feel like, I can't make myself do this. This is really, really difficult. Number 2, if you feel like your work relationships and your work performance are suffering for whatever reason. It could be multiple reasons. It could be lack of motivation. It could be that you're in a toxic work environment. It could be that you're not working with the right type of people that, are a good fit for you. But for whatever reason, if your performance and your relationships with your coworkers are not doing so well and are suffering, that's a red flag. Number 3 is if you gain very little or no joy or satisfaction from your job. Now, some of us, just to be clear about this, they don't care about, feeling joy from their job. Some people say to us, which is completely reasonable, I just want to feel like I accomplish something every day and get a good sense of satisfaction. I can do my passion stuff outside of work. And that's totally fine. But you at least want to get some sense of satisfaction from what you do and at least a little bit of meaning, I think, in some way, shape, or form, however you decide it, or define it, I should say, sorry. Number 4 is if you've really started to slack off and have little or no motivation, that is a really big red flag too. And this could be for multiple reasons, like we said earlier, but you want to just pay attention. This is not a good thing either. Number 5, if you feel like you have to become someone else at work, and this is a really big one and something to kind of think about, because what we would say here is obviously the majority of us have like a personal persona and a professional persona. We're not supposed to just lay it all out there on the line, in a professional setting, because we're supposed to act, in a certain way. And that's just normal and common. But if you feel like you have to become like a completely different person or really shut down one element of who you are as a person or one important element of your personality type just to be able to function at work or be successful there or fit in, that's not a good thing. You should be able, at least to a certain extent, like 75 or 80% of the time, feel like you can be yourself and you're being true to yourself at a bare minimum. Okay. Number 6, if your job doesn't make use of your talents and strengths on a regular, consistent basis, that is a huge red flag. And 7 and 8, if you spend the majority of your time complaining about your job to your spouse, your partner, friends, and family member, that's a big red flag. And if for any reason you fantasize about quitting, being fired, or let go, huge red flag. And I know I'm kind of, smiling at this one because I know it might sound kind of silly, like how can anyone feel that way, right? And the majority of us obviously do not want to get fired. But for some of our clients, sometimes that was the push they needed in order to go out there and find something new that was going to be better for them. We had a client several years ago working with one of our coaches. And about like a minute into the conversation, the coach said, "You sound really good today. What's going on or what happened?" And she said, I got fired last week. And it was the best thing that's ever happened to me, because for multiple different reasons, she just wasn't ready to quit. She didn't feel like she could do it, et cetera, et cetera. But for her, it was such a weight off of her shoulders in her specific situation that it enabled her to free up her time and energy to search for that new thing that was going to be a better fit for her. So these are our 8 red flags. And let's take a look at our results here. And we'll do this poll in just a moment, Mary, if we could. So if you've got between 1 and 2 red flags, you want to consider whether you're just maybe going through a rough patch. Maybe it's a little bit due to the changes as a result of COVID, or maybe it's because, for example, you're working on a project that you don't enjoy as much, or with a client you don't enjoy as much. And it may be best for you to reevaluate things like in 2 or 3 months and see how things are going when things have changed. So make some adjustments to where you are now, because we always want people to kind of look in their own backyard, because the easiest thing to do, obviously, would be to either stay put or be able to maybe make some tweaks if it's possible to do so within your current organization and your role, to see if that helps. If it's not going to help, totally understand, and that's okay. But if you've got just a couple of those, let's reevaluate in a few months. If you have 3 or 4 red flags, you're probably not in the right career, but you may be closer than you think to your ideal career path. Great idea, again, to write down what works for you in your current career and job, and what doesn't work for you, like as a 2-column list, so that you can see, okay, how many things are in each of the columns, and how important are those items in each column too. That helps you be a little bit more objective about it, because normally people understandably are pretty emotional when they're not satisfied at work. And again, they just feel like, okay, I need to do something big here because I'm so unhappy. These exercises will help you be a little bit more objective and practical and realistic. And if we could go ahead and launch our first poll here, Mary, that'd be great. If you have 5 or more red flags, it's definitely time to make a change. So this is how you can get a sense of not just if it is time to go, but also how dramatic of a change may or may not be needed, again, based on what we talked about earlier, related to whether it's the work environment or the industry itself that you're just tired of, for example. So we'll give you a moment here to complete this poll. I'm going to adjust my screen a little bit too, because I realize my light is a little bit funky. Oh, and we've got half and half. Okay, so really good. Thank you for being honest about this. And it looks like this was helpful for you all too. So I think that's good. And keep in mind, like we said, depending on the number of red flags, and I would also say the type of things that are going on for you, this again can help you get a sense of what kind of change you might need to be making. Let's talk next about fulfillment and why we feel really strongly that it's important to understand what would be rewarding and fulfilling to you first, versus, for example, just going to, okay, these are my strengths, this is what I'm good at, so I'm going to look at jobs related to that pay well, and that's it. What we find is that when people start to think about what would be satisfying or rewarding to them at the beginning, they come up with more career ideas than they would have otherwise. They see and are more assertive, if you will, and motivated to find other jobs out there that they may not have even noticed existed. So it's really, really helpful. Sorry, guys, my dog is scratching himself. The fulfillment piece helps them brainstorm alternative ideas that they may not have even known about. And the other thing that we have found about fulfillment is it helps people think a little bit more creatively and outside the box. And it also tends to impact every other piece of our ideal career model that we'll share with you in just a moment. Like, for example, if we're not leveraging our strengths on a regular basis, then we are not going to be fulfilled. And if we're not being paid in the, compensated in a way that we feel is adequate for us and what we deserve, et cetera, we're not going to be fulfilled, and kind of vice versa. So the fulfillment piece really can have a big impact on everything else. So let's talk about what fulfillment means and how we define it. So our coaching model when we work with clients is very values based kind of at the beginning. And there are 4 ways that we would suggest that you can start to think about, okay, what would fulfillment or satisfaction mean to me? And think about it at this point in your career. So what's changed for me like post COVID, because our values and priorities, I think, have changed based on what we've all gone through. But also in terms of where I'm at in my career right now, what is important to me at this point. So one way is to journal for just a couple of minutes about how you define success. What does success mean to you at this point in your life and in your career? And just write about it for like 5 minutes. Doesn't even have to take that long, but there will be clues and themes to what some of your possible values and priorities are when you write that down just for a couple minutes. The second thing that you can do is to identify, and even more so, dig underneath your interests and your passions, those things that you do outside of work, your hobbies, what, when you exercise, what are you drawn to? Is it tennis or running or whatever? And with all of those interests, think about what is appealing about those things to you. Because even if those interests are not viable career paths necessarily, if you think about what is, why you're drawn to them and what's cool about them for you or what's important to you about them, that can give you clues to what is possibly or could be possibly fulfilling for you, elements of things that you can incorporate into your job. So for example, if one of your hobbies or something is doing something creative, do you need a little bit more creativity into your career path, or to infuse a little bit more creativity into your career path? And can you do that at your current job? Yes or no? A third thing you can do is to write down, and we even will have our clients do a vision board about their ideal day at work. What qualities would it have? What would it look like? How would you feel? What type of people would you be working with, et cetera? And the final and most important way for us, at least, that we have our clients understand what is going to be really fulfilling to them is we have them define or identify their top 3 career values by doing a peak experience exercise. And what we mean by a peak experience exercise is a time in your life or a period of time in your life. It could be a moment of time or a period of time when you felt lit up and excited. It does not have to be that you climbed Mount Kilimanjaro or something huge. One example of a peak experience we've had from people is a trip to Italy or Europe or something like that. Or another person actually said when he was the editor of his high school yearbook that he just loved. So when you start to write about and think about what was cool about that peak experience for you and why it was a peak experience, that can give you clues to your values as well. Again, focusing on what was cool about it, a little bit less on what the details were. And if you think about it this way, I'll just kind of give you a quick example here. 2 people may have a trip to Europe, let's say, as one of their peak experiences, or, just a trip to Mexico or whatever it is. One person, when they think about what was cool about it for them, might be talking about the travel planning, where they were going to eat, how much time they were going to spend in each place, etc. And another person with the same trip may be talking about completely different things, like they loved and were excited about getting to know the culture and the language, etc. That's a completely different set of values that this person has. One is more like planning and detail and project management kind of stuff, versus another one maybe more about, helping people create experiences. So you want to really dig underneath this peak experience and write down everything that was cool about it for you. Sometimes sharing it with a friend or family member or a coach like us, we can help you debrief it and identify what those themes are so that you're really starting to pull out, okay, these are what some of my values are. And as part of that, we always are happy to offer a free career strategy session to anyone who listens in later or who is participating today to give you some advice. And it's also a call to learn a little bit more about our coaching services as well. And we mention this now because a lot of times people feel like they need a little bit more help, not just identifying their values, but defining them further and also understanding, okay, how do those values translate into, the right career path for me and some possible career ideas. Okay. So feel free to email us at admin@halliecrawford.com, not just for the slides, but if you'd like to set up that call, it's always with me directly. So our fourth tip is to review our ideal career model. And if I had to say, picking out of all of the tips that we are providing to everyone today, the most important one, or the one that I would work on first, it would be this one, actually, because I think the model, the way that we designed the model, I designed this model early on in my coaching career because I realized that it would be helpful for people to have like a really practical, tangible tool to evaluate if they're in the right fit or not, but help them brainstorm and paint the picture of what would be the right career fit. So it really helps you be objective and consider all necessary components of being in the right job. And we would recommend, and on the next slide, it's going to be just a little bit bigger here, so I'll move to that. But we would recommend that you review each of the pieces of the career model, like step by step, to evaluate if you're in the right job, yes or no now, and also what kind of changes or tweaks you need to make. So it's pretty easy to understand. I'll go through each of the pieces here for you to make sure that you understand what each of the pieces mean. But please know we tried to make it, as straightforward as possible. So it's, it is what it is, basically, as we talk about each piece. So if we move over here, we'll start with the fulfillment piece, which we've already talked about. And as we said earlier, fulfillment interacts with every other piece of the model. So if you're not leveraging your strengths, you're not going to be fulfilled. If your work environment over here, if the values, let's say, of your organization or your boss, or like the vision or mission of your organization isn't really aligned with your values, and even maybe steps on some of your values, it's not going to be a fit. So it's a really important kind of cornerstone piece, which is why it's blue at the bottom. And we always start with that first. The second thing we want you to think about too is not just, am I getting a deeper sense of meaning or enjoyment or satisfaction from my job? But we also want you to think about like the tasks that you're performing every day and the projects that you're working on. Are you getting enjoyment out of those? And the other things that you're doing outside of your primary role. So for me, for example, one of the things that I actually love about being a coach, but also a business owner, is I get a lot of enjoyment, not just from the coaching element, but also I like creating presentations like this, because there's a creative element for me that like gets into picking the right images and that kind of thing. And I also discovered early on as a coach that I love giving webinars like this and being interviewed for the media, et cetera. So not just am I, a coach, if you will, which would be my primary sense of fulfillment, but the other things I get to do in my job are like icing on the cake, even better. So that's what the enjoyment piece means. You want to take a look at your strengths and make sure that your job is making the best use of your strengths on a regular enough basis, and also those strengths that you still want to be using and leveraging, because plenty of our clients will say, look, I've been using this set of strengths for years and I'm tired of it. I want something new. I want to have a different challenge. So it's not only important to understand, is your current position leveraging your strengths, but is it leveraging the strengths that you want to continue to leverage at this point in your career? You want to take a look at your past education all the way back to Vanderbilt, as well as your experience. The reason why education is on here is for two reasons. Because you want to start to think about, okay, are there other career paths that I could pursue based on my education? But one of the things when I was thinking about, the career path I wanted to pursue a long time ago, I started to think about the courses and classes that I enjoyed most at Vandy. And those were psychology, interpersonal communications, the kind of stuff that a coach would do. Okay. So it could give you some career ideas as well. We want you to think about your experience. Is your current job leveraging your experience in a way that you want it to, and the experience that you would like to be leveraging? And finally, last but not least, these last three, your personality type is critically important to being in the right fit. So for example, if you're more introverted, but you are in a more extroverted role and forced to be a little bit more extroverted in your job, that's not going to work for you. That is a big make or break. So you need to make sure that your role is right, that the work environment is a fit for your personality type, the people you work with, etc. Work environment interacts enormously with personality type. You need to be in the right culture and belong to an organization that you at least believe in to a certain extent. And finally, compensation is critically important too. Compensation is not the least important, and that's why it's last. No, it's critically important, just like, we can all agree, I'm sure. But like we said, we don't want you to just go for that, because if you look at the model going to the left here and all of these other areas, at the end, that will help you brainstorm the most ideas, be creative with your thinking, and then kind of narrow things down based on practical considerations. And before we move to the next slide here and we start to move to our Q&A, some people will ask, why are these kind of falling into place? It's because we have you look at each of the pieces of the model individually, one step at a time, going in this order. And the picture of your ideal career path is kind of falling into place, if you will. You're painting the picture over time and generating and brainstorming ideas. So it's like a puzzle, if you will, that the pieces should be falling into place for you as you look through this. So you can use the model as a checklist to know whether you are in the right job now or not. If you have a bunch of the pieces out of whack and that are not a fit, it probably means you need to make more of a dramatic change. So we talked about at the beginning career assessments, and we wanted to go ahead and do our second and our last poll for today too. We're curious how many people have actually taken a career assessment before. We like them. We actually like the StrengthsFinder assessment. That's usually the one that we use with our clients, but there are a lot of good free ones out there and also paid ones as well, like Myers-Briggs, DISC, etc. What we want you to keep in mind if you have done or decide to take a career assessment is remember that it's not going to cover every piece of the model. It's one of the elements that you need to consider. So use it wisely and consider, for example, looking at the model here for just a second, that the assessment may be testing you for your personality type and maybe a little bit about your strengths, which is great, but it's not going to give you the complete picture of, is that job going to be fulfilling and is it going to pay you enough? So you just want to keep that in mind and use the assessments wisely to know that, okay, this is telling me one piece of the puzzle, but I also have to look at these other pieces too. So we've got 64% are saying they have taken one. So I hope that assessment was helpful for you. And now that we're talking a little bit more about how to use it, that's actually helpful as well.
Hallie.
And 36% are saying, oh no, I got it backwards.
Yeah.
Sorry. Thank you, Mary. Sorry, reading the results wrong, even though I have my glasses on. So most people are saying they have not. So if you do decide to take one, StrengthsFinder is one that is very good. We would recommend if you do use that one, you only need the top 5 strengths. You don't need the full 30 or whatever it is that they give you, because that actually I think is more overwhelming, and the 5 is plenty. So that's a good one. And there's lots of, if you just Google free career assessments, you'll find a lot of really good ones too. And for those of you, the 36% that say they have, just keep in mind, again, like we said, you want to leverage it and use the information wisely. Part of the reason why we like the StrengthsFinder assessment, and this is our last slide before we get to Q&A, is because it also helps people really well prepare for interviews too, because it gives you really good language to talk about your strengths and what you bring to the table. So when you're thinking about, and honestly, I probably should change this slide because we're not at least not in the intensity of COVID that we were before. So as we start to move out of it, a little bit, you just want to think about the economy and what's going on, especially reading the room of your organization and your industry. Is this a good time to move or not? Is it better to stay put for another 6 months, make some changes based on the model, and then see what happens? And you can also think about if you do need to stay put for a little while longer for whatever reason, consider what else you would be happy with if you can't make a change at this time. Is it worth asking for a little bit more flex time or a title change or a bonus or something like that? So just try to be think outside the box with it and make changes where you are at your current position as much as you can to see how much and if that can help. And if it's not helping enough, then definitely it's time to make a move. All right, so we'd love for people to come up with at least 2 action items that they would take as a result of being here today in the next week. Reviewing the ideal career model is one. My email address is here to send the slides or the strategy session, kind of set that up if you need to too. But let's go ahead and go to, I've got the chat open, I think here. Let's go ahead and answer some questions if anyone has them. And Mary, if you could help kind of field those, that'd be great.
Yeah, of course. I do have one here that was submitted beforehand, and it looks like the person might be on the call. So I want to make sure that this question gets asked. So what is the line between grit and dedication? So kind of sticking something out and showing perseverance, and then kind of versus tending to your own needs. So let me know if that question needs to be rephrased for you, but I think it's pretty clear.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. It's a really, really good question because I think a lot of people tend to struggle with this. What I would say honestly is if you look at, there's a difference between, like square peg and round hole versus just being committed and dedicated to your job. You can be committed and dedicated and have a lot of grit, but we want you to have it in a job that's a fit for you. So if you look at the career model and you're like, look, more than, one of these pieces is not in the right place for me, then most likely it's time to make a move and use that grit and dedication somewhere else. If you feel like you're pushing a boulder up a hill or it is like that square peg round hole, then you need to tend to your own needs. For sure, absolutely, because there's a big difference between the wrong fit and just trying to improve yourself and do better in a job that really actually at the end of the day is a really good fit for you. It's a great question.
Thank you, Hallie. What about any advice for risk adverse people in the group?
Yeah. For those who are risk averse, and I remember reading this one in advance too, and it's a great one. Think about 2 things, I would say. Be really practical and smart about making the change and have a plan for yourself, a financial plan, as well as a plan for, tackling your job search in a way that works for you, that will push you outside of your comfort zone just enough to make the change, but it's not like you have to find something tomorrow that puts so much pressure on you. So come up with a plan that feels really, really good for you. And then the second thing is to take a look at the career model again to help kind of motivate you. And if you're looking at, for example, okay, look at all of these pieces that are not a fit, I really do need to try something different. That can help kind of push you outside of your comfort zone a little bit more. And in the meantime, and I would honestly say this for everyone on the call or listening in the meantime, do try to make some changes where you are and see if that does make even the slightest difference. Because sometimes when we make really small changes in how we approach the work that we're doing or how we prioritize our time, we can actually have a huge impact on our satisfaction. So try that as well. That's a really good question too.
I think I loved everything about that answer, Hallie. It was so good. This next question sort of fits into what you were talking about there at the end, but how do you smoothly transition to another job if that's what is needed?
Yeah, so I would say for this one, and because that's a really great question too, and it's a scary thing. Like, please know, even for people who are great with risk, making a job change is no one's favorite thing. So again, like, make a plan and give yourself some breathing room and say, okay, my goal is in the next 6 to 8 months or a year or whatever it is for you. That's when I want to be able to have made a move by that time. So come up with a time frame and a deadline, come up with action steps that you will take in a plan to make it happen, starting with your resume, your materials, all of that as part of it. As part of it, you've got to be clear about your direction. So brainstorm ideas and give yourself enough kind of breathing room and time to implement each of those action steps. And just like be persistent, be focused, and take your time with it. And that will help it be as smooth as possible. Don't just have some knee-jerk reaction. Be really methodical with, okay, now I need to start networking and learning a little bit more about other jobs. And now I need to do some research, etc. So the more and more you have like a really good, actionable, reasonable plan, the better off you're going to be, and the smoother it will be too. And obviously you want to handle your departure at your current position in a really professional way and hit the ground running at your new place in a really smooth way as well. That's a really good one too.
Here's another question. And if anyone has a question here in the moment or has a follow-up thought that they'd like to ask, please send that in through the chat. So Hallie, is there any way to know whether the issues are more maybe us, or if maybe there's something going on in the company, and if a change is really going to be what is life-giving to us?
It's a great question too, because sometimes it is us, and we always tell our clients we don't want them to take their baggage, so to speak, to the next job. So make sure everything is kind of cleaned up in your own house, so to speak, where your challenges might be before you make the leap or realize that you'll have to continue to work on those. This is a really good time to maybe get some feedback from either your boss or a trusted coworker. Look at previous performance reviews, for example, and be willing to be honest with yourself about what your strengths are and maybe what some of your weaknesses might be. And if some of this does have to do with you. And as part of it, or part of that question too, whether it's the company itself, I think people can kind of tell. Like this again is where you maybe want to get a sense of, if you, as best as you can, talking with coworkers, et cetera, or just listening in to the subtext in meetings a little bit more to get a sense of what's really going on within the organization. There are things that you can do to find that out just by listening in to different meetings and paying attention to how other people feel. And that can give you a clue to whether, it's really that this organization is kind of struggling. But again, it's helpful as well to talk with someone external to your organization too, to give you kind of a gut check and a realistic sounding board of, yeah, that doesn't sound normal. That can be really helpful as well.
Okay, so I think I have one more question. If you enjoy your job, but it really drains you, how do you put limitations around that?
This is a great one. Someone asked me, several months ago, like, can you be in your dream job too long or working too much? And absolutely you can. So this could be, it depends on your situation, the person who's asking, but it could be that some boundaries need to be put in place a little bit more. Like, you clock out at 5 o'clock, at least twice a week or something. It could be that you need to pay attention to where and how you're spending your time. And maybe outside of work or even during work, you need to take, a little bit more of a break to just do things to re-energize you. Because some of it is not always about boundary setting and, time management per se, but how you're spending that time and if you're being as efficient and effective as you could be. So those are some of the things that I would consider. And even though you enjoy what you do, is there a way literally to just cut back a little bit and, maybe get some flex time? Do you maybe need to say, let me start using up some of that vacation time or personal time that I've never used to really, give myself a break? Those are some things to consider. It's a really good one.
Thank you so much, Hallie. Any final words of wisdom that you would like to share?
Just take it in baby steps. I always tell our clients this because I know this can feel overwhelming. It's a really big life decision, and just give yourself the time and space as much as you can to take a step back, go through the exercises and tips and tools that we gave you all today to really evaluate what the right next thing is so that you can be smart about it and then be methodical going step by step going forward.